Hold on. I honestly don't know if Luca would be here if it wasn't for you. I'm serious. And also, you taught me so much about how to best support him and parent him. I thought it would be really powerful to hear a little bit about your story and sort of let people know why your voice is so important. Where do we start, right? I know, I was trying to think, if we don't want to make this video hours long, how do we even tell your story within a few minutes?
I have an alcoholic father. So growing up in that house, the abnormal was normal. My dad's family was from Canada, and I would go spend my summers there. In Canada, when I was with my grandmother, I not only felt safe, but I felt heard and seen, and she did such a good job. That's why it was so hurtful when my grandmother took her life. My grandmother used my swing set. She hung herself on my swing.
And how old were you?
I was 9 when my dad was sober. He didn't have his medicine. So often, people think that if you just get sober, you get better. And that's not the case. And he didn't go to therapy or go to some kind of program where he could get tools to be okay sober. I don't feel this way anymore. But at that time, he was a monster. And it was scary if I made mistakes. Mistakes being my shoe untied or coloring outside of the lines.
If you weren't perfect, there was going to be aggression. So how did that rage manifest itself?
Different ways, sometimes physical abuse, sometimes mental abuse. Sometimes he would weaponize my mom or myself at each other, punish me for something she did wrong or vice versa.
So you're growing up in this chaos, and then at 11 years old, is that right? You're introduced to drugs by
my aunt. My first substance was heroin. My mom finally left my dad for real. It wasn't just, we're going to stay in a battered women's shelter and come back. It was, he's actually out of the house. And my mom moved her sister in to help out with me.
Who everybody already knows is on heroin, to basically babysit you while your mom's working.
Yes. She would just smoke heroin, while we were watching TV or whatever that was normal in the house. And so one time I was curious and just asked for the first time about it. And I said, how does it feel? And she said, do you want to try it? My aunt was very abused by her father. And so that was her relief. That was how she was dealing with her childhood. So I do believe that she was offering me the same relief in her mind.
So she thinks she's doing you a favor almost.
I was immediately addicted.
Like, what does your life look like from 11 into your teens?
In 7th grade, I would struggle to make it through a day. My aunt would meet me in the parking lot at middle school so that I could make it through the day. And there were other behaviors that she normalized for me. My aunt was prostituting herself, and I was seeing that. So by the time she died of AIDS, and I was off on my own, having to pay for my own drugs, I knew what to do to get them. When I normalized sleeping with men for drugs, that was a pretty quick progression of the things I was willing to do to stay high. 7th and 8th grade, I flunked out and had to do summer school.
And then 9th grade is when you dropped out of high school, out of school completely. What happened after that?
My dad, his disease progressed and he became addicted to meth. So my dad had a meth dealer and I was living in Virginia, and because of court orders, it was time for me to come visit him. And shortly after coming home, he introduced me to that meth dealer, and I ended up being sodomized for the next 3.5 months in his care. I did not go back to my dad's. My dad let my mom know that I had run away and I was on drugs, and there was...
But he knew where you were?
Yes. There was even a time that he came and I heard him in the living room and I thought he came for me, and then he left. And I remember going to like a much darker place mentally after that. And that was one of those times where it was like, okay, this is where I live now, and I gotta survive.
How did you get out of there?
I escaped and found my way to the airport. I remember calling my mom from the airport when I landed in Virginia, and I remember that she walked right by me. She did not recognize me. I hadn't ate many meals. I was completely gaunt, and I was bruised everywhere. In my mind, I screamed out to her, but it was like barely coming out. And she turned around and did a double take, and I had to scream twice, Mom. And she just like fell apart. I was crying, like, what happened? What happened? And I said, I never want to talk about it. And she said, okay, let's get you home. And we just didn't. And I used it that I got high about that situation, about what happened to me there for 2.5 years. When my mom remarried my stepdad, he was way more abusive physically than my dad ever was. I mean, he broke my mom's femur. So she was in a cast for 18 months, and he'd beat you. I mean, he would drag my mom all over the house, beating her. And then he would explain, he would quote biblical scripture on the lesson God was having him teach. My mom and I got to the point that we would say goodbye at night and not good night. My stepdad had a lot of guns, and my mom would say, if you ever hear one go off, he's coming for you next, so go out the window. My fear of that and my mom's fear of that was safer for me not be around this man who was violent. It was actually safer for me to be at this crack house. My mom would drop me off at it. It was safer than being home.
As someone who did not grow up the way you grew up, like the idea of I'm gonna drop my child off at a crack house because they're safer there is mind-blowing. What happens that makes you go, I wanna get sober? Because I'm telling you right now, if I'm going through so much trauma and the drugs are numbing it, I don't know that I would have the strength. I'm just being blunt. I don't know that I would have the strength to go, okay, I will give up the one thing that's been numbing the pain.
To be perfectly honest, I probably would still be getting high if I didn't get arrested. That's why I hate when my kids say, oh, the cop did me a favor and let me go. The consequences are why I got sober. After being arrested several times, when I was incarcerated this time, they brought support groups and I was offered hope.
So what that support group did for you is basically what you are now doing for all the kids in your groups. Because I know one of the things that helped Luca, it helped me, it helped other kids and parents that I was in support groups with, is that you made everyone feel seen. And they would hear your story and go, well, God, if she can have a good life, if she can prioritize her mental health. But the fact that you not only turned it around, but then went, wait, I want to be for others what that support group was for me. It's amazing. What does your job do for you?
It gives me purpose. For the first time in my life, I feel useful and it feels like I'm good at something.
And you're really, really, really freaking good at it. And I adore you.
Likewise, thank you.
Regardless of all the awful, awful stuff life throws our way, we can still build something good and we can still put something good into the world.
Absolutely.
And have an incredible purpose in life.
And there's no excuse. We all have stuff. Whether we want to say what level it is irrelevant because we all have stuff, we all have struggles. What are you going to do with it?